I saw him shoot and hit the top corner from about 40 yards. And it was phenomenal, you know.
The greatest individual the Swans have ever had. He was elegant, he was graceful.
His record for Wales suggests he was one of Wales's greatest ever players.
And he played in an era with the likes of John Charles, another great, and Cliff Jones. But he stood on his own. He was that good.
He'd get the ball and it was a buzz.
He really was Swansea's golden boy. This is Cwm Level Park in Plasmile, Swansea, a real hotbed of schoolboy football in the 1930s and 40s. Beyond the houses behind me is Landor, Bryn Hyfryd, Manselton, over to Cwmbwla. And in those 20 to 30 years, so many footballers came out of these places that would eventually play for then Swansea Town Football Club. In September 1944, 2 games of football were played on this very pitch. An under-16 game, and that was then followed by an under-18 game. A man called Joe Sykes walked 2 miles from his house to stand at the side of this pitch to watch the under-18 game. Joe Sykes was a legend of Swansea Town football. He'd captained the side for 11 years before World War II, including the journey to the FA Cup semi-final in 1926. But by now, he was in charge of the youth at Swansea Town and was the chief scout of the club. And he'd been told that a player was going to play in the under-18 game that he really needed to see. As fate would have it, Joe turned up just at the end of the under-16 game. And he noticed a little kid being called across by the under-18 manager and was offered a shirt for the senior game. He didn't think too much of it at that time, but within minutes of the start of the under-18 game, the player that Joe had come to see was long forgotten. When he looked at the youngster, Joe would say years later that with his very first touch of the ball, he realised he had unearthed a gem of a player of a very rare quality. After the game, Joe went on to the youngster and asked where he lived. And the youngster pointed over there, Landegg Street, less than 100 yards away from this very pitch. A couple of days later, Joe went to see the young lad's dad, Charlie, and he asked him, nearly begged him, could he sign him for Swansea Town Football Club. They had to wait until the boy was 15, and luckily for Joe, that was less than a month. So on the 16th of October, 1944, Joe signed the young lad that he'd seen playing on this very pitch as an amateur for Swansea Town Football Club. Nobody that day would have realised that the boy that signed those forms would go on to play over 500 games for the Swans, scoring over 180 goals, becoming Wales's most capped footballer and their highest scorer with 23 goals. Because that lad was Ivor John Allchurch.
He revered Joe Sykes. He thought Joe Sykes was wonderful, and I think that was the main reason that Ivor didn't go from Swansea before he did, because Joe, coming from Sheffield, had always thought Swansea was wonderful, and he'd say, don't move away, you won't like it anywhere, stay there. He did talk about the day that Joe Sykes had watched him play and had gone on to him and asked, where he lived and everything. So he'd gone over and had a word with Ivor's father to ask if he could take him down to the vet field, and that was it, basically. But as I say, he just idolised Joe Sykes.
In the mid-1920s, Britain was hit by a recession, and Charlie and May Allchurch from Dudley in the Midlands decided that Swansea was the place to come to try and find work. They initially went to Winewen Road, just the other side of Cwm Level Park, but soon after Ivor was born, it was here that the family came to live, at Landegg Street, number 39, the house behind me now.
They were a family of 8, and they were the two. Leonard was the youngest, and then Ivor, but there were 4 years between them, which is quite a gap when you're young, really. But I think Ivor kept an eye on him, but of course he'd been away for his 2 years training, which Leonard popped into his bedroom then. He had his bedroom full at the time. But they were very close because they were the last two, as I say, in a family of 8.
So just a minute's walk from Ivor's front door in Landegg Street is Plasmile School. Ivor first came here when he was just 8 years of age, and just looking at the schoolyard now and realising that's where he would have first kicked a football, it really brings to you the importance of this area. And of course it wasn't just Ivor that played on this yard. The Daniel brothers, Bobby and Ray, also started out at Plasmile School. Now the teacher Hugh Sinnott here plays a very important part in Ivor's development. During World War II, inter-school football was not played. The Swansea schoolboys, for example, didn't play in any of the war years. So the only football Ivor got was in the after-school clubs that Hugh ran from this school that gave Ivor his taste for football. Ivor left the school age 14, not with many qualifications, and just down the road he got a job in the Baldwin's armament factory making bomb casings. But it was a job he hated. It was a long day, it was boring, it wasn't what he wanted to do. And one day by chance, walking past a group of friends playing football at Com Level, he asked them how they had time to play football in an afternoon. And they basically told him that they had a job at Swansea Fish Market, which meant they could clock off at 1 o'clock, which gave them time to play. And that was music to Ivor's ears. He joined the fish market, worked there for a number of years, but was allowed the precious time to play his football.
Well, when he came back from doing his national service, he was actually 20, because they went away 18 to 20. And, you know, I'd been watching the Swans for a long time, so I probably knew more about the players than he did, because I watched them play all the time. When he first came back and he trained with the first team, I know he loved that, and he looked so young beside all the others. But we had just had promotion as well, so that was lovely, going up a league. But he just was thrilled to be back out of the army and back training with the Swans.
He was a young lad doing his national service. He was only 20 years old, and then in 1949 he made his debut against West Ham United away.
When he first came, in that first season, he made his debut on the Boxing Day away at West Ham, and then against Birmingham City in the Cup, and that's when he scored his first goal. And he'd really arrived then, as we say, you know, he never lost his place really after that.
He was a regular in the team. He played something like 22 or 23 games after making his debut. The team he joined had just won promotion from Division 3 South. It was Billy McCandless, the manager's side, and they were the likes of Billy Lucas, who had Roy Paul, Reg Weston. They were a real hard working side, very cultured. Unfortunately, some of them were the wrong side of 28, 29, and they were on a slow, if not decline, but they needed freshening up. And this is where Ivor come in. From there on, everybody, Wolves, Birmingham, Manchester United, they were all after him.
Gradually you'd always hear of clubs being interested, but he wasn't really interested. I remember Wolverhampton Wanderers coming, and I can remember Liverpool coming down to see if he'd sign, but he wasn't interested because I think it was the Joe Sachs thing again. Couldn't have had more money. They were in the second division then, we were in the second division, so what was he to gain? Leonard and Betty, who was my sister, were getting together then as well, and eventually married. So you were like two sisters married to brothers, very close. So he never wanted to go away because he couldn't see where he was going to better himself, really. He never wanted to leave, and that was it.
After just 30 games of him appearing for the Swans, he was selected for his first ever international cap, and that was at Rooker Park against England.
Well, I remember his first cap. He kept saying, everybody says that I'm in with a chance of playing for Wales. Like reporters and things were telling him, and players at the Fetch. And the only way you used to know if you were selected for Wales then, you had to listen to the radio 6:30 to find out, and the team would be announced. And he was going to call up for me. And he was late, and he wasn't usually late. And when he came, I said, "Why are you so late then?" And he said, "We've been listening to the radio." It's a funny thing to listen to the radio. Now, I had forgotten all about it. So I said, "What were you listening to the radio for?" And he said, "When they announced the Welsh team." "Oh." And he said, "I'm in." And he was so excited.
Although the game was won by England 4-2, that was just the beginning of his 68 caps, which for many a year still is a record.
Another brilliant Ford goal for Wales.
He was fiercely proud of playing for Wales. But it was amazing to go and see the Welsh games, yeah.
Ivor's impact at the 1958 World Cup in Sweden was astonishing. He played in the 5 games that the team played in. He scored 2 goals. The goal against Hungary, which ended up, it was a volley from outside the box, which is an incredible goal. It was voted the goal of the tournament. And the Real Madrid president at the time, Santiago Bernabeu, claimed that at that time that Ivor Allchurch was the best inside forward in the world.
I did see him, I did watch him play for Wales a few times. We were there watching Wales play Russia, and my father scored a brilliant goal, quite an amazing turn in the penalty area, and I think Wales won 2-1. I remember that.
Ivor had an amazing impact on the Swans in his 10 seasons at the club.
That year when we were in Division 2, we had players like Terry, Cliff, Mel was starting to come on the scene. There was Ivor, and it was a really good team. And Tom Kiley got, the famous injury when Tom Kiley was out. And I think from being right at the top of the table, and that was the nearest we would have got then to get into the First Division, I think all the players were disgruntled, really, that they could see nothing was being done to replace Tom, and we just slumped and dropped down the table.
We were top of the league.
Yeah.
We beat Liverpool 2-1 down, yeah, right? For a month.
Yeah.
We were top of the league, we'd beaten Liverpool in a cracking game. Billy Ledl was playing, the famous Liverpool player. Tom Kiley gets injured in midweek. No, we won't bother buying anybody. We'll try, I think they tried Jim Presley was there, but they wouldn't spend the money. The next game after Kiley was injured, we lost 6-1 away to Leicester City. You can't believe it. And then, strangely enough, at the end of the season, or towards the end of the season, we beat Leicester City 6-1 at home. Yeah, but they tried to do everything on the cheap, unfortunately, and it cost them.
And then I think the first to go was Terry. And once Terry went and Cliffy followed quite quickly, I think then players were getting that they thought, are we ever going to get out to this division?
And as a result, by the end of that season, Terry Medwin left. Season after, Cliff Jones left. And eventually, Ivor left. Because Ivor, he's no different to anybody else. He wanted to test himself in the top division, which was the First Division in them days. He
didn't want to be transferred anywhere really, but the Swans were in financial difficulties, and they like Swansea has always had to do to survive, sell its assets. So Trevor Morris was in charge then. So he called Ivor in and he said, we've had an offer from Newcastle, so we want to accept it. So Ivor comes home and he says, right, he said, I got to go. And he said, but I'm not signing. I'm just going up on the train and I'm coming back. So on the same day. So off he went. And then he didn't come back. And then I'm going up Morrison, Woodford Street, doing my shopping. And a woman shouts at me and she said, hey, she said, your old man have signed for Newcastle. No, I said, he's just gone up to meet somebody.
Do you think Ivor wanted to go to Newcastle?
I wouldn't have thought it would have been his first choice. He was with the Swans for 10 years, and as hard as he tried, unfortunately the team weren't going to make the first division, you know, as much as he would love to have represented the Swansea Town in Division 1. But no, I don't think he ever really wanted to go.
You know, we're not on phone at home, so I go across the road to the phone in the post office and ring Bill Payton, who's the sports editor of Evening Post. I said, Bill, I just heard that Ivor signed for Newcastle. Yes, he said. No. I said, he was just going to talk. And he said, no, I'm sure Esme, you've signed. So he said, and he's playing Saturday. I said, well, he can't play because he hasn't got his boots, you know, all full of myself now. And he said, his boots are going on the afternoon train.
After the World Cup and the way that he played and the way that the team performed, he was at his prime. In terms of finances for the club, it was definitely in Swansea Town's interest, if not the individual player. Well, we lost when he football in terms of golden boy. I know it's a cliche, but he was such an exceptional player. And of course, when he moved to Newcastle, I've had a player there that was international quality playing in the Newcastle side. I think he gave him a big fill up just going there, and he became club captain. He was that good. He was that revered up there.
Of course, it's all over the Evening Post and everything, so I know now he has gone. Saturday I go down to sit with my sister, because Lena's playing, and we're watching the television, and then I see Ivor Allchurch goes for Newcastle after 20 minutes. I said to my sister, oh God, he is there. 10 minutes later, Ivor Allchurch goes second goal for Newcastle, so I know they were playing Leicester. So still no sign, no word of him. So it's the Sunday morning, about 8 o'clock, here he comes. And he hasn't got any luggage or anything, so I don't know how he managed. So he comes back on the Sunday morning, and I said, well, what have you gone and done? And he just said, that's okay, isn't it? You know, you'll be all right, kid. That's what his words were. So that was how I found out I was going to live in Newcastle.
Being the professional that he is, he gave 3.5 seasons with Newcastle. He gave his best. And even though it's been a long time since he played for Newcastle, he is still revered by the club, by the fans that were old enough to watch him play in. And he'd always be revered in Newcastle.
Mum and I took the journey that my father did when he was transferred to Newcastle. So we took it by train. It was a long journey. God knows what it was when my father went up there, but we went up there by train, stayed there for 4 days, and we did the tour of the Newcastle ground, and they have a tour with these two elderly chaps. I wasn't allowed to say who my father was. As they were taking us around, they didn't know, and then about halfway around I just had to tell them, and I said, Ivor Allchurch is our father, because they've been talking about him so much. And with that, the whole tour just stopped, and they just talked about my dad all the rest of the tour, which was amazing really, and made the trip.
It was the maximum wage of £20, so it was just going to be £20 when you went there. Ivor said my wife would like a bungalow, so they didn't have a bungalow. You know, the club in those days had a list of houses that they owned, that they rented to the players, but they said, we'll go and buy one for her. So they had to go and buy one on a new estate because it was more expensive than the other houses they owned. We had to pay £3 a week rent. So out of the £20, they took £3 straight away. Then by the time your tax and your insurance and everything, so you were literally moving all that way not to be financially better off. But of course he was going to play in the first division. You know, because I've always been a football fan and loved my football. What I was so pleased and proud of is that people were saying, oh, he's left it too late now to get the first division. You know, he won't be able to compete in the first division. But he just ran the show. He was amazing. Going up to St James's Park, and it was in the middle of the town, like which the vet had been as well. So you just walked up to it, and it was immense.
Well, I remember going to some matches because I'm a bit older than David, so I was able to go and watch him play. And I remember the first time I remember going to see him play was in Newcastle. And I know I went there quite a few times to St James's Park, but the one match that sticks out in my mind was when Newcastle were playing Manchester City. And I remember my mother pointing out the goalkeeper of Manchester City was Bert Troutman. And that's probably the only time I remember watching Newcastle United play, when I must have been about 4 or 5 years of age at that time.
I had my son David there, which we were ever so grateful. We would never been able to have him if we hadn't been there. It was a wonderful hospital and everything. So as Ivor always said, well, we may have not won the cup, and we may not win the league, and we had relegation, but we came home with something much better, which was David.
Of course, in 1962, Ivor returned back to Wales, and he returned playing with Cardiff City, who in them days were like the Swansea reserve side, with John Charles and Mel Charles and Barry Hall.
He always says his wife was homesick, but it wasn't his wife. He was the one that was homesick, but it was easy to put the blame on the wife. And that again, I didn't have much say in it, because he dropped his wages by 1/3 to go to Cardiff. But he didn't care about money, ever. Ivor didn't mind. He never cared about money. That didn't matter. We were going to Cardiff, so we're going to Cardiff.
I used to go regularly to watch him play when he played at Cardiff City, at Ninian Park.
All the clubhouses were in the same area, and I knew a lot of the girls because of the Welsh team. But then Mel was round the corner, and I obviously knew Mel's wife, Vera then, and Alan Tarrington I knew from the Welsh team, Colin Baker, and then of course, as I said before, John came. We were all there.
And we all lived in the same area in Cardiff, near Rubina in Cardiff. And I remember in particular one day where I was playing football with my friends. We must have been about 5 or 6 of us, all aged about 10. And my father and John Charles turned up. And we had a match between us. So we took on John Charles and Ivor. And you would have thought they would have let us win, wouldn't you? But they hammered us. And so that was, we saw a lot of John Charles in those days. And I think Peter Rodriguez, another Welsh international, was living in the same area, so we saw him as well. So it was, we didn't really think anything of it, you know? They were just
normal people, weren't they?
My father's friends,
yeah,
and their children, and we played together, yeah.
In 1965, Ivor returned back to his beloved Swansea Town, where the manager who signed him at the time was Glyn Davis.
We loved it at Cardiff. Bill Jones had promised him a job there and everything, you know, when he retired, like, because Ivor never wanted to be a manager. All he wanted to be was coaching, you know, coaching youngsters he'd like to have had. So always that promise, but then managers change. And we end up with Jimmy Schooler. And Jimmy Schooler never liked Ivor. Ivor didn't think either way about it, you know. He was a hard man, and so they didn't get on at Emirates. Ivor scored the hat-trick for Cardiff, and that meant Swansea went down and Cardiff stayed up. And then, of course, what happens? You get signed for Swansea. We didn't get him, lower league then, but low division, but we came, you know, we were in Swansea, living in Swansea.
It was like the prodigal son coming back home. It was, and he stuck out like a sore thumb because he was so elegant, balletic even, you know, he was incredible. He was a one-off. He had a shot like a rocket. I mean, 2 goals he scored that I remember, 2 of the many he scored. Aston Villa in the League Cup. He picked the ball up, he veered towards the north bank, and then, as he could do, he just dropped his shoulder and like the sea parted. and he hit the ball 25 yards top right hand corner. Keeper didn't have a chance, and he was outstanding for the Swans. He was outstanding. Unfortunately, he joined a club that was on its way down from the second division. As you know, we went to the third division for the first time. We only lasted 2 seasons there, and we were down in the dreaded fourth division. But its quality, it stood like a beacon. The fact that he was still top goal scorer in the year that, in 1968, in the year that they decided not to re-sign him. You know, it was just incredible, incredible.
He'd had a testimonial. He had his testimonial, and they put the proposition to him that because he'd had a testimonial, and Ivor's testimonial was 2,200. Leeds had come down, they just won the cup, they brought the cup, everything was fine. So, and it was a full house, but he said he wanted to make sure that, you know, Leeds were flown down, they were given everything, yeah, and no expense spared to run it. He didn't want it. So he had his 2,200 cheque, and they said because of that, they thought he could take a drop in wages of £5. £40 the wage was, that was the wage, and take a drop of £5. Well, I was raging. I was absolutely fuming because I thought that money for the testimonial hadn't come from the club, that money had come from supporters.
It appears that it was all to do with finances. I can understand that the club were struggling, there's no question about they were struggling financially, but not to give you top goal scorer another season at least, no, it didn't stick well with a lot of people. In fact, the fans at the time, they were very annoyed. They were up in arms about the fact that they didn't try to keep Ivor for at least another season.
So I was furious. I said, I don't care, I'll just go out and work now. You know, you're not doing that. So, and he was very upset by him because he thought he was going to have the job here of coaching the youngsters again. But and he really still felt he wanted to play at Enright. He didn't want to give up then. So at Enright, that was it. You know, end of his time with Swansea.
Ivor's career was so long that by the time he'd finished, which was his final game was against Hartlepool in 1968, he spanned generations. He spanned the time of the Roy Pauls, the Reg Westons. He spanned from there right up to Herbie Williams, Vic Gummersall, Billy Screen, all them young men who were still playing and who still revered him.
And we used to play football together, didn't we? And you played as well?
Yeah, we used to go down the local pitch down Bishopston and play, take shots. His shots were a lot harder than ours. Yeah. But I remember trying to stop one of his shots. I think my hand bent back. But that was fun, wasn't it? Yeah. He was good like that. He was,
Yeah, we used to go and train together, and I think we did. The three of us played together for Bishopston.
Yeah, in a
times.
couple of friendly matches, I think they'd play us together. Obviously, we outshone him.
And then he was definitely going to give up. And he did, I think, for a week. Well, you say you never want to be a manager, but you like play a manager of Haverfordwest, you play a manager of Pontypridd. And he said, yeah, but I'm not manager, because he said I could not bear to sit Saturday afternoon watching 11 people do my job.
And I remember playing one match up in the valley somewhere, and Dad was playing, Len was playing, Gareth Edwards was playing, Barry John was playing, Ronnie Rees, all these celebrities. And I always remember a corner being taken, and Len had a pint in his hand whilst taking a corner, and it came across, and I'm sure it was Gareth Edwards headed the ball in the net. And it was great, and it was great for me, obviously, with all these talented people, and I'm coming off the pitch, and I've got all these people wanting my autograph and I only played for Bishopston.
You couldn't walk anywhere through Swansea with him without people coming up and saying, hello Ivor, and he would have a little chat with them. I remember that he used to take us for a meal, and he rarely paid because he was so well thought of that the restaurants wouldn't take any money from him.
In his own company, when he was comfortable with people, he was great fun. He was, he loved a joke and everything, liked to drink with us, drink with people. He had, I think he liked close friends. He didn't have many friends, but he had close friends, and outside that, outside his circle, he was quite shy.
With his friends, his close friends, he was the life and soul of the party. He was great fun to be with when he was with his friends, yes. We used to go down the beach, didn't we, and down Caswell, because we live just up the road from Caswell Bay. And I remember he used to take us down there on a Sunday, and we'd kick the ball around on the beach. But he didn't put any pressure.
No pressure at all, was there?
No.
No. John used to play for Clace Coats when you were younger.
That's right, when I was about 14.
And so Ken, I think, used to run it, didn't he? He used to run Clace Coats.
Ken Evans.
And then on a Sunday, they'd be training. I was only small then, but the big blue van would come down here to pick it. You'd have all the boys in the back of the blue van, and to pick John up, and I'd go with him down to Caswell, where they would train, with my father would train him then. And they'd have a big bowl of hot chocolate, I can remember, because I used to come along and drink the hot chocolate while the boys were training.
I only met him once. I met him up in, I was at the park and my son was playing football. And I'm watching my son playing. I'm there and I'm watching and I'm enjoying the game. And I felt there was somebody behind me. I don't know why. And I turned around and it was Ivor. And he smiled at me and he said, "Good evening." It was an evening game, of course. He said, "Good evening." He said, "How are you?" And I said, "Well, fine, thanks." And I didn't know what to say to him. I wanted to talk to him, but I was just, you just don't know what to say to a genius.
I don't remember a lot of him as a footballer. Just a dad, to be honest, not actually playing football. I was aware of what was going on and how good he was.
Of course, I worked with David, his son, for many a year. Lovely boy David, played some football with him. And I asked him the one day, I said, "What's it like, Ivor being your father?" I said, because to me, I worship him, like the majority of people in Wales, in Swansea. And he said, "Well, to me, he's dad."
I didn't realise, because he's just your dad in the end, and he wasn't a superstar to us. He was very normal, quite shy.
People would come on to him, and like that wasn't all that many years after he finished playing. He said, I don't understand how people still recognise me, see. And he said, and they still want to talk about games. He said, I could understand when I was playing. He said, but then he'd be embarrassed sometimes when people go a bit over the top. But he said, now when I'm not even playing, and that they remember me.
He didn't really appreciate that he was a footballing superstar. He was just your father, just your dad.
So I've only noticed, good God, probably the last 10, 15 years, it's really dawned on me and what people think. It's like he's become more famous now.
People have always spoken to me about him, and if it's youngsters today now, they'll say, "Oh, my grandfather or my great-grandfather always talks about him," and always say, "Oh, we've seen them all, but I was the best." So I am very proud of the fact that so many people remember him.
So we're very proud of him, of what he did. It was a great achievement what he did, because with his caps, was it 67, 68 caps? And you didn't get a cap every game in those days, where you get a cap for coming on for 2 minutes now. So it was a huge achievement, and what he did and the goals he scored. And
the fact that the statue is where it is, so that Ivor is looking back towards the vetch field. So I thought that's really lovely. So it's quite nice. Every time I go to the football, I can say, "Hi, Ive, I'm here again." You must think, oh God, here she is again.
We did the box the other day in Plasmile. That was fantastic. And to see those things being done, and it just brings it all home to you how well liked and famous he was.
Yeah, well, I agree. I can't say anything more than David has just said. You know, we're immensely proud of what he achieved.
He probably didn't know himself how well thought of he was. I think he would have been quite shocked of what's going on now and how famous he was and how obviously how well liked he was.
Although he was shy and introverted, he was quite an emotional man as well, and I think he would have been overwhelmed by the adulation that he's had and he still has to this day.
It would have made no difference to him though. He wouldn't have been a different person. He would just been the same family type person that he always was.
Oh, I don't know what he'd do now. I think he'd just give in and say, oh, I'm great.
Ivor Allchurch was, without any doubt, the greatest individual the Swans have ever had. He was elegant, he was graceful, he was a one-off. There probably will never be another Ivor Allchurch or anybody like him.
A lot of things I remember about him were just feelings of the time. Yeah. You know, oh my God, you got the ball, you know, from 40 yards out sort of thing. And I saw him shoot and hit the top corner from above 40 yards. And I mean, it was phenomenal, you know, because it wasn't much of him, you know. He wasn't a big bloke, but he had good legs.
He was very deceptive. People didn't think he was as fast as he was, but he was a very fast footballer. But he would, something like lope over the ball. He'd run and his body would be like arched over it and shielding so that you wouldn't know how fast he was really.
He used to hit the ball and he always seemed to protect the ball by laying over it. You know, I've seen photographs of him since, and it sort of exaggerates that, if you like.
His ability on the ball, the way that he had so much total control over the ball. He was graceful. I know I've used that term before, but everything about him was easy on the eye, and his shot was like a cannonball.
He had a very hard shot. I mean, I'm on the other end of it, but you could just see the way the net bulged and how if it hit people, they'd, you know, be flowed sort of thing. He used both feet, which is a terrific advantage. He could play left or right.
Well, his ability to shoot, I suppose, and carry the ball and keep it, you know.
And of course, in them days, you played on mud heaps. It didn't like it is today, you know. It's not a criticism of today's footballers, good luck to them. But they played, but he used to glide over the pitch.
I wonder now how he ever managed on those pitches, because after about 4 or 5 weeks, and the rain it does in here, there was a mud heap in the middle, and at the end of the season, it was rock hard on there, and then sort of bouncing everywhere, you know.
We can watch Messi, Ronaldo, players like that who are absolutely brilliant, and it would be nice to see Ivor Allchurch play in the same conditions on the same quality pitches as those players, these modern players, play on. That would have been an interesting thing to see.
You can't really compare players. You can't compare eras. It's unfair. But if somebody said who's the nearest in style, I'd say myself someone like Dennis Bergkamp, who seemed to have time on the ball. But they got time because they're quick thinking, they got mastery of the ball, and that allows them time to do what they want.
His ball control was tremendous. He was always available for the ball, you know.
And he could header a ball. Now, people would never, they'd say, oh, but he doesn't header the ball, but they weren't watching it enough. They didn't analyse it right, you know. because he did, and he had a few hat-tricks where he'd done the 3, you know, the perfect hat-trick, right, left, and so he was. And of course the famous header was when he played at Scotland, and they went to Scotland to play, and then in the last minute he scores the header, and we won the game. So I thought, well, if you think he can't header, that's what he does.
I think he was the best player at that time, because football was different in those days. They were allowed to carry the ball, or at least they were encouraged to carry the ball, whereas now you've got to pass it square and backwards and all sorts of things. Whereas I don't think that was as entertaining as Ivor Allchurch was. He'd get the ball and it was a buzz, you know. It's, oh, Ivor got it, you know.
I remember watching Alan Curtis at the Vetch, and Kurt was just amazing that day. And I turned to my dad and I said, Alan Curtis has got to be the best player the Swans have ever had. And my dad looked at me and he went, yeah, he's good. He's not as good as Ivor Allchurch was. And then years later, I was at the stadium and Trunz was playing. And he was brilliant, man of the match, tricks, all sorts, scored a great goal. And a lad who was with a friend of mine, I think it was his nephew, at the end, he was full of Lee Trundle and he said, oh, Lee Trundle's got to be the best player the Swans have ever had. And I looked at him and I said, he's good. He's not as good as Alan Curtis. And my dad said Alan Curtis wasn't as good as Ivor Allchurch. So I think Ivor, even though I never saw him play, he sits at the top of all Swans players. Everything I've read about Ivor Allchurch says he was Swansea's greatest ever player. His record for Wales suggests he was one of Wales's greatest ever players. And you can have the discussion about Gareth Bale and John Charles and Ivor Allchurch for the records that he set.
Ivor unquestionably has been one of Wales's greatest ever players, and he played in an era with the likes of John Charles, another great, and Cliff Jones. But he stood on his own. He was that good.
Yeah, in the history of Swansea City Football Club, Swansea Town Football Club as was, Ivor Allchurch sits at the very, very top of all players.
It can only be for that time, and at that time he was everything. He was beautiful to watch, he was elegant. Thankfully, he was a lovely man by all accounts. I mean, I only ever asked him for his autograph, so I'm not going to pretend that I knew him, but he was always very polite, very courteous, and that's the way you want all your heroes to be.
The best stories tend to come full circle. Ivor's story began on Cumlevel Park, less than half a mile from where his statue now stands. I suppose there's always going to be a discussion about who the greatest Swan of all time was. Ivor, Kurt, Trunz, Leon. In a way, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that these players became heroes to the fans that paid to watch them. It's so apt that Ivor's statue now stands as the memorial garden for Swansea City fans. I can't think of a player that would have embodied the people of Swansea more than Ivor. And it's also quite ironic when you think about it, that he stands in front of a multi-million-pound stadium when he played for the club down at the Vetch, he was earning less than £20 a week. But I guess that's what makes Ivor's story so captivating, so real, and so honest. He was a Swansea lad, a shy, lovely lad that did his best every time he pulled on the white shirt and left a legacy that we, the fans, and his family can be proud of forevermore. Ivor Allchurch really was Swansea's golden boy.
I see the buildings cluttering the skyline, built by miners on a pittance of pay. They work together, never on a Sunday. That was not their way. Now Zoa's empty and Bethel's boarded up. New silos silent nearly every day, except for Tuesdays. The sisters gather, 4 ladies meet to pray. Talk about the golden days. Tell me, doesn't the sun still shine waited with his mother for him every day. He worked at Lipton's on the bacon counter, but days just fade away. And I think about my own kids waiting for me as I come home at the end of the day. The smiling faces, nobody's told them what all the papers say. Where are the golden days? Tell me, doesn't the sun still shine? Tell me, isn't the air still free? And these are golden days, if we still believe. So travel on with your journey, but just remember, keep your eyes on the sky. And when they tell you, don't you believe them, it's never do or die. These can be golden days. These can be golden days. The sun still shines. Tell me, isn't the air still free? Tell me, isn't the world still mine?